My name is Margaret. I am 78 years old, and I am speaking to you from a small town in Georgia, USA. Before I begin my story, please make sure you subscribe, like this story, and click the notification button so you won't miss the other chapters that are coming. Also, tell me from which part of the country you are watching this from, because I really want to know where my listeners are. Now let me take you back in time. Back to the most painful night of my life. Back to the eve of my wedding. It was supposed to be the happiest night a girl could ever have. My wedding dress was hanging by the window. My flowers were already delivered. My friends had been singing with me, making me laugh, and even teasing me about the new life I was about to begin with my soon-to-be husband, James. But all that joy was stolen in just one night, by the very man who was supposed to protect me. That man was my father. Yes, you heard me right. On the very night before my wedding, my own father forced me into pregnancy. I remember his heavy steps as he entered my room that night. At first, I thought maybe he wanted to bless me or pray for me before I became a wife. But instead, his eyes were wild. His voice was low and broken, and he whispered words that no father should ever say to his daughter. He told me that I would not walk into my husband's house as an innocent bride. He said I belonged to him first. When he grabbed me, I froze. I screamed, but nobody came. The house was silent, as if the walls themselves were too ashamed to speak. My tears fell on my white bedsheet, the same bed where he stole everything from me. And by the time he left, I knew my life had changed forever. Because he did not just touch me. He planted a seed in me that I never asked for. I was just 19. And that night became the secret that almost destroyed me. But before I tell you the rest of what happened after, let me take you back to the beginning, so you can understand how a family that looks so perfect on the outside could hide such a monster within. I was born in a small farming town, the eldest of 5 children. My father, William, was a respected man in the community. People called him the Pillar, because he donated to the church and always helped neighbors with food or money. My mother, Ruth, was quiet and obedient, the kind of woman who believed a husband's word was final. To outsiders, we looked like the perfect American family. But behind closed doors, things were very different. My father ruled our home like a king. His voice alone could silence the whole house. If he walked in angry, even the plates on the table seemed to tremble. He never beat us in public, but inside the home, his belt left marks on our skin. And whenever I tried to speak up, my mother would whisper, "Shh, Margaret. Don't anger your father. Just obey." I grew up carrying that silence inside me. But even in the darkness, I had a small light, James. He was my childhood friend, the boy who lived 2 farms away. He was gentle, always smiling, always protecting me from bullies at school. When we grew older, he told me I was the only girl he wanted to marry. For the first time in my life, I felt seen, safe, and loved. When James asked for my hand, my father pretended to be happy. He shook James's hand and even said, "Take care of my daughter." But deep in his eyes, I noticed something cold. Something jealous. At that time, I didn't understand it, but later, I would. The weeks leading to the wedding were filled with excitement. My friends helped me pick flowers, my sisters giggled as they tried on their dresses, and my mother, though nervous, secretly slipped me advice about being a good wife. Yet, behind all that, I could feel my father's eyes watching me more closely. Sometimes he would call me into his room and ask strange questions like, "Do you really love James more than me?" Or, "Do you think he can take care of you better than I have?" I would laugh nervously and try to brush it off. But his questions left an uneasy feeling inside me. Then came the wedding eve. That was the night my joy turned into ashes. I still remember sitting on my bed, touching the lace of my gown, imagining how James would look at me when I walked down the aisle. But instead of joy, I received horror. My father came into my room, smelling of whiskey, his face hard and twisted. He locked the door. My heart began to race. He sat on my bed and told me I was not leaving his house untouched. I thought he was joking at first, some kind of cruel test. But then his hands reached for me. I fought. I begged. Cried out. But he was stronger. And in that moment my childhood ended. My innocence ended. My dreams ended. The next morning, I looked at my face in the mirror. My eyes were red, my lips trembling, my body sore. But everyone around me was full of joy, rushing about, preparing for the big day. They didn't know the storm that had just swept through me. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But instead I wore the dress, put on the veil, and walked down the aisle, carrying a secret inside me. A secret that would soon show itself in the form of a pregnancy I never wanted. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, something else happened that morning at the altar that shook me even more. When I stood at the altar that morning, everything inside me was shaking. My body was in that beautiful white gown, but my spirit was somewhere else, hiding, broken, afraid. James was smiling at me, his eyes full of love. Everyone in the church turned to look at me as I walked down the aisle. To them I was a radiant bride. To me I was a prisoner wearing a veil. The pastor asked the usual question. "Do you, James, take Margaret to be your lawfully wedded wife?" James answered with a strong, joyful "I do." Then the pastor turned to me. "And do you, Margaret, take James?" Before I could speak, I looked out into the pews. My father was sitting there, right in the front row. His eyes locked on me. His face was calm, but in his gaze there was a warning. A warning only I could read. Say nothing. Tell no one. Or else. My throat went dry. My lips trembled. For a moment, I almost said no. I almost shouted out the truth. But then I thought about my mother, about my younger siblings who still lived under his roof, about the shame the church would throw on me, not on him. So I whispered the words, "I do." And just like that, my life was tied to James, but my soul was chained to my father's secret. The church erupted in joy. Bells rang, people clapped, and rice was thrown. Everyone saw a wedding. But only I carried the memory of the night before. That evening, after the celebration, James and I entered the small house he had prepared for us. It was supposed to be our first night as husband and wife. He reached out to touch me with love, but my body recoiled. He looked at me confused. "Margaret, are you all right?" he asked. I forced a smile, but tears filled my eyes.
"I'm just tired, I whispered."
He nodded, kissed my forehead, and held me as I cried silently in his arms. He didn't know the truth. He thought my tears were from happiness, but deep down they were from pain. The weeks went by, and I tried to play the role of a good wife. I cooked, I cleaned, I smiled when neighbors visited. But inside I was breaking apart. And then one morning I realized my monthly flow had stopped. Fear gripped me. I went to the small clinic, and the nurse smiled as she gave me the news. "Congratulations, you are pregnant." My hands shook. My world collapsed. James was overjoyed when I told him. He lifted me up, kissed me, and shouted, "I'm going to be a father." He ran outside to tell his friends. But I knew the truth. This child was not his. It was my father's. And with every day that passed, my stomach grew, and so did my guilt. At night I lay awake, thinking of what would happen when the baby came. Would the child look like James? Or would it carry my father's face? One evening, about 5 months into my pregnancy, James came home early. He looked troubled. He sat me down and said, "Margaret, there's something I don't understand. We have only been married for a few months, yet the doctor says the baby seems older." My heart stopped. I didn't know what to say. My hands trembled as I tried to find the right words. But before I could speak, James's eyes narrowed. "Margaret," he said slowly, "tell me the truth. Whose child is this?" And just then the door to our house opened. Standing there with a cold smile on his face was my father. When I saw my father standing at the doorway that evening, my whole body went cold. His smile was not a smile of joy. It was the smile of a man who knew he had power over me. James rose from his chair, confused. "Mr. William," he said respectfully, "what brings you here?" My father stepped in slowly, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. He looked at James, then at me. "I came to check on my daughter," he said calmly, but his eyes pierced mine like a knife. James nodded, though still tense. "We're doing fine, sir. Margaret is healthy." "Is she?" my father asked, tilting his head. His voice carried a hidden threat. He walked closer, placing his hand gently on my shoulder in a way that looked fatherly to James, but to me, it was chains tightening around my neck. James glanced between us. "Actually, sir, we were just talking about something important. The doctor says the baby is further along than we expected. It doesn't add up." My heart began to pound. My lips trembled. I looked at the floor. My father chuckled softly, his voice low. Doctors make mistakes. Don't trouble yourself with such thoughts, James. The only thing you need to worry about is caring for your wife. James frowned. His eyes searched mine for answers. Margaret, he asked. But I could not speak. My throat was dry, my palms wet. I felt like a bird trapped in a cage, and the one holding the key was my father. After a few minutes of thick silence, my father finally left. He patted James on the back, whispered, "Good man," then looked at me one last time before stepping out into the night. That look said everything. Say a word, and I will destroy you. When he was gone, James turned back to me. Margaret, he said firmly, I know you are hiding something. Please tell me. Tears filled my eyes. I wanted to shout the truth. I wanted to tell him everything. But the fear of shame, the fear of destroying him, and the fear of my father's threats tied my tongue. So I whispered, James, please trust me. The baby is yours. He looked at me long and hard. His eyes held doubt, but his love for me softened them. He nodded slowly, though I could tell he didn't fully believe me. For a while, things calmed down. James treated me with kindness, preparing for the baby's arrival. But the silence inside our home grew heavier with each passing day. The closer my due date came, the closer my secret threatened to explode. And then the day arrived. I went into labor on a stormy night. The rain pounded on the roof as I screamed in pain. James held my hand, whispering encouragement, while the midwife rushed about the room. After hours of agony, I finally heard the cry of my baby, a boy. The midwife smiled, wrapping him in a cloth and handed him to me. I looked at his tiny face and my heart broke, because the baby's eyes were not James's. They were my father's. James leaned in with a smile, but then froze. His smile faded. His eyes narrowed. He stared at the child, then back at me. The silence was louder than thunder. Finally, James whispered, Margaret, what have you done? And before I could answer, the door creaked open again. This time it wasn't my father. It was my mother, her face pale, her hands shaking. She looked at the baby, then at me, and whispered words that made my blood run cold. I know whose child this is. When my mother's words fell into the room, I know whose child this is. My whole world stopped. The baby squirmed in my arms, his tiny cries filling the silence. James froze, staring at her, then at me, his face pale with disbelief. My lips trembled. Mother, please. But her eyes were heavy with something I had never seen before. Not shock, not anger, but sorrow. She stepped closer, her hands trembling as she reached to touch the baby's cheek. He looks just like his grandfather, she whispered, her voice breaking. James's jaw dropped. He stepped back as if struck by lightning. What are you saying? He demanded. His voice cracked with pain. Ruth, what are you saying? My mother's tears rolled down her cheeks. James, this child is not yours. I sobbed. The truth was no longer a secret. The walls I had built around me collapsed in 1 second. My shame stood naked before them both. James staggered to a chair, holding his head in his hands. No, this can't be true. His breathing grew heavy. His eyes, when they finally met mine, were filled with betrayal. Margaret, tell me this isn't true. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. James, I never wanted this. I swear on my life, I never wanted this. But my mother cut me off. Her voice was sharp, trembling with a hidden fury. Don't say it, Margaret. Don't you dare say it aloud. Her reaction startled me. For years, she had been silent in the shadows of my father's cruelty. Now I understood why. Mother, I whispered, you knew. She froze. Her silence gave me the answer. James looked between us, confused, his anger boiling. What are you both hiding from me? My mother clasped her hands tightly. Margaret, listen to me. You must never tell anyone. People hear this, it will destroy all of us. Your father, he has power. He will ruin James, he will ruin you, he will ruin everyone. We must carry this secret to the grave. I shook my head, my tears burning. No, Mother. I've carried his evil long enough. I won't keep silent anymore. James shot up from his chair. What evil? He shouted. His voice echoed through the room like thunder. I looked at my husband, the man who had given me love when I had none, and I knew I could no longer keep him in darkness. So I whispered the words that tore my soul apart. James, the baby is my father's. The room exploded. James staggered back, almost falling. What did you say? He cried, his voice breaking. He clutched the table for balance, shaking his head violently. No, 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 this can't be. My mother wept loudly, covering her face. Oh Lord, forgive us. James's eyes blazed with fury. He grabbed a glass from the table and hurled it against the wall, where it shattered into pieces. Your father. Your father? His voice was raw, filled with both rage and grief. I sobbed harder, rocking the baby in my arms, my heart breaking for him. James, please believe me. I never wanted this. He forced me. He destroyed me. I swear I'm telling the truth. James pressed his hands to his head, pacing the floor like a man losing his mind. I married you, Margaret. I gave you my name, my heart. And you bring me this abomination? His words pierced me like knives. But before I could answer, the door burst open. And there he was. My father. He stood in the doorway, his eyes dark, his presence filling the room like a shadow. His gaze landed on the baby in my arms, then on James, then finally on me. And with a voice that made the hair on my neck rise, he said, "That child belongs to me." When my father's voice thundered, "That child belongs to me," the room fell into a deadly silence. James froze, his face twisted in disbelief. He turned slowly toward my father, his fists clenched. What did you just say? My father stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. His boots echoed on the wooden floor as he walked closer. His eyes were locked on the baby in my arms. You heard me, boy. That child is mine. Flesh of my flesh. Blood of my blood. James's face turned red. He trembled with rage. You filthy animal, he roared, rushing at my father. In a flash, the two men collided. Fists flew. My mother screamed. I clutched the baby tightly, retreating into a corner, crying as I watched the man I loved fighting the man I feared. James landed a hard punch to my father's jaw, sending him stumbling back. You touched your own daughter? He shouted. You ruined her. But my father, though older, was strong and vicious. He recovered quickly, grabbing James by the collar, slamming him against the wall. She is mine, he snarled. She was mine before she was yours, and she will never stop being mine. His words made bile rise in my throat. My knees weakened, but I held my baby close, shielding him from the horror. James broke free, his eyes blazing with fury. He lunged again, punching my father over and over, shouting, You monster! You devil! My mother cried out, trying to pull them apart. Stop! Stop, you'll kill each other. But neither man listened. The sound of fists, grunts, and broken furniture filled the house. Finally, James shoved my father hard, sending him crashing to the ground. Blood dripped from my father's lip as he slowly got back to his feet, his eyes burning with hatred. You will regret this, my father hissed. You think you can steal what is mine? You think you can hide her from me? No, James. You don't know who I am. I will destroy you. James panted heavily, sweat running down his face. Touch her again and I'll kill you. The tension was so thick I could hardly breathe. My baby whimpered in my arms, sensing the chaos. Finally, my father spat on the floor, wiped his mouth, and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. His words echoed in my head. You will regret this. James collapsed into a chair, his body shaking, his knuckles bleeding. He looked at me with eyes filled with both love and despair. Margaret, he whispered. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I fell to my knees sobbing. Because I was afraid. He said he would hurt us all if I spoke. James, I swear, I never wanted this. James reached for my hand. His touch was trembling but warm. I believe you, he whispered. But now he knows I won't stay silent. He'll come after us, Margaret. He won't stop until he destroys everything. For the first time, I saw fear in James's eyes. The next few days were strangely quiet. My father didn't come around, but his absence felt like a storm gathering strength. James began making plans. He whispered to me late at night about moving away, starting fresh in another town where my father couldn't reach us. I wanted to believe it would work. I wanted to imagine a life free of his shadow. But deep inside, I knew my father's grip was too strong. And my fears proved true one morning, when James left early to buy supplies for our move. Hours passed. He didn't return. The sun began to set, and still no sign of him. My heart pounded with dread. I rocked the baby in my arms, whispering prayers. Then, just as the night fell, a knock came at the door. I rushed to open it, hoping it was James. But instead, 2 men in sheriff uniform stood there. One of them removed his hat, his face solemn. "Mrs. Margaret," he said softly, "we're sorry to tell you, but James has been found." My breath caught. My knees trembled. Found? Found where? The sheriff hesitated, his eyes heavy with pity. "Your husband, he's been found dead." The words hung in the air like thunder. "Your husband, he's been found dead." I couldn't breathe. My baby slipped slightly in my trembling arms, and I clutched him tighter, pressing him to my chest. My knees weakened, and I had to lean against the doorframe. "No, no, you're lying," I whispered, my voice cracking. "James can't be dead. He can't." The sheriff's eyes softened with pity. "I'm afraid it's true, ma'am. He was found near the old mill road. It looks like his carriage lost control and overturned." I shook my head violently. "No. James was strong, careful. He would never lose control like that. This doesn't make sense." But the sheriff only sighed and tipped his hat. "I'm sorry for your loss. We'll send someone tomorrow to check in on you." And with that, they left me standing in the doorway, my baby crying in my arms, my world crumbling beneath me. That night, I wailed until my throat burned. My baby cried along with me, our tears mingling in the silence of the house that suddenly felt like a tomb. I wanted to believe it was just an accident, but deep in my heart I knew it wasn't an accident. It was my father. The way he had left, his threat, "You will regret this," echoed in my head. And now James was gone, silence forever. The funeral came quickly. Neighbors brought food, spoke kind words, and patted my shoulder, but their eyes also carried whispers of judgment. "Such a young widow," they murmured. "And with a baby already." My mother came too. She stood quietly by my side, her face pale, her eyes filled with guilt. She whispered once, "Be careful, Margaret. Your father is watching." But I didn't want her whispers. I wanted justice. After the funeral, I went to my father's house. I stormed into his study, holding my baby against me. He was sitting at his desk, calm as ever, reading a newspaper as though nothing in the world had happened. "You killed him." I spat, my voice shaking with rage. "You killed James." He slowly folded the paper and looked up at me. His eyes were cold, unflinching. "You have no proof." Tears streamed down my face. "Why are you doing this to me?" "Why? I'm your daughter." He leaned back in his chair, a cruel smirk tugging at his lips. "Because you are mine. And no man takes what is mine." James thought he could challenge me. Now he's gone. Let that be a lesson, Margaret. My stomach turned. I clutched the baby tighter, whispering, "You're a monster." His smirk deepened. "Call me what you want. But you'll always come back to me. Because the world will never believe you. You're just a woman. And I am respected. Who will they believe?" His words cut me deeper than any knife. For the first time, I realized the full weight of the prison I was in. I stumbled out of his house, shaking, broken. The night air hit me like ice. I looked down at my baby, his innocent eyes blinking up at me, and I made a silent vow. I will protect you. I will not let him destroy you like he destroyed me. Days turned into weeks. I tried to move forward to care for my baby, but grief weighed heavy on me. At night, when the baby cried, I sometimes thought I heard James's voice in the wind, whispering comfort. But comfort didn't last. Because one stormy evening, as I rocked my son to sleep, I heard heavy footsteps outside my door. I froze. My heart raced. Then came the knock. Slow. Heavy.
Familiar.
I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The knock came again, louder. And then his voice. "Margaret, open the door. It's your father." The sound of his voice outside my door made my whole body tremble. "Margaret, open the door. It's your father." I clutched my baby tightly, pressing him to my chest. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might break my ribs. Every part of me wanted to stay silent, to pretend I wasn't home. But his footsteps paced back and forth across the porch, heavy and slow, like a predator circling its prey. "Don't make me knock again," he growled. The baby whimpered softly, his tiny cries threatening to give me away. I covered his mouth gently with my hand, rocking him, whispering, "Shh, please, baby. Please." For a long moment, silence. Then the sound of the doorknob rattling. He was trying to open it. My hands shook. I whispered a prayer, begging God for help. Finally, his voice lowered, deep and cold. "You can't hide from me, Margaret. I'll always find you." Then, after one last pause, I heard his boots retreating down the steps. I didn't move for a long time. I sat there on the floor holding my child, shaking so badly I thought I might faint. That night I didn't sleep. I kept a kitchen knife beside me, my ears sharp to every sound of the wind. When the sun finally rose, I felt like I had survived a war. For a few weeks after, he didn't return. I dared to breathe again, though the fear never left me. I focused on my baby. He was the only piece of joy I had left. His laugh, his little fingers curling around mine, his innocent eyes. All of it gave me strength to keep going. But the shadow of my father never left. One afternoon, while I was out hanging laundry, I saw my mother approaching from the road. She looked pale and weak, as if life had been drained from her. She hurried to me, gripping my hand. "Margaret," she whispered urgently, "you need to leave this place. Take the baby and go. Your father, he is planning something." My chest tightened. Planning what? Her eyes darted around nervously, as if even the trees could hear. "He says you are too stubborn, that you are defying him. He's been drinking more, raging more. Last night he said, if you won't come back under his control, he'll make sure no man ever looks at you again." Her words made my blood freeze. "What do you mean, Mother?" She shook her head quickly, her eyes brimming with tears. "I can't say. Just listen to me. Leave before it's too late." I grabbed her arm desperately. "Come with me, Mother. Please. You don't have to live under him anymore." Her lips trembled. She wanted to say yes. I saw it in her eyes, but fear chained her. She shook her head, whispering, "I can't. If I leave, he'll kill me. But you can still run." Tears streamed down my face. "Mother." Suddenly a shadow fell across us. I turned, and there he was. My father stood just a few feet away, his face twisted with rage, his fists clenched at his sides. "So this is what you do behind my back, Ruth?" he growled. "You plot against me? You poison my daughter with lies." My mother gasped, stepping back. Her lips trembled. "William, please, I..." But before she could finish, he raised his hand and struck her across the face. She stumbled to the ground, clutching her cheek. I screamed, clutching my baby tighter. "Stop it!" His eyes snapped to me. They burned with a fire I had never seen before. "You think you can defy me too, Margaret? You think you can run from me?" And then, with terrifying calm, he pulled something from his coat. A revolver. The sunlight gleamed off the metal as he pointed it straight at me. The cold barrel of the revolver gleamed in the sunlight, aimed directly at me. My breath caught in my throat. My baby began to cry loudly, his tiny wails piercing the heavy silence. "Father, please," I cried, clutching my son to my chest, shielding him with my body. "Don't do this. I'm your daughter." His face was twisted, his eyes wild. "You were mine, Margaret. You are mine. And no man, no child, no whisper of rebellion will change that. If I can't have you, then no one will." My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. My mother was still on the ground, clutching her cheek, sobbing. "William, no," she screamed. "She's your child. Put that gun down." But he didn't move. His finger curled tighter around the trigger. I felt death breathing down my neck. For one terrifying second I closed my eyes and whispered a prayer. "Lord, if I must die, let my baby live." Then bang. The gun fired. I screamed. My ears rang. But when I opened my eyes, I realized I was still standing. The bullet had not hit me. Instead, I saw my mother on the ground, clutching her arm, blood pouring through her fingers. She had thrown herself in front of me at the last second. "Mother!" I cried, dropping to my knees beside her, trying to stop the bleeding with my free hand. Her face was pale, her voice trembling. "Run! Margaret, run!" But my father roared, his fury rising. "You dare defy me? You dare steal her from me, Ruth?" He raised the revolver again, pointing this time at my head. Suddenly, before he could fire, voices echoed from the road. Men shouting. Hooves pounding. The sheriff and 2 deputies stormed onto the property, guns drawn. "William Carter," the sheriff barked. "Drop your weapon now." For the first time, I saw hesitation flicker in my father's eyes. He lowered the gun slightly, his jaw tight. "Put it down, William," the sheriff repeated, stepping closer. "Or we'll shoot." My father glanced at me, his face a mask of hate, then slowly, very slowly, he lowered the revolver and dropped it to the ground. The deputies rushed forward, grabbing him by the arms. He didn't resist, but as they dragged him away, his eyes never left mine. "This isn't over, Margaret," he hissed. "You are mine. You'll always be mine." Those words chilled me more than the gun ever could. The sheriff hurried over, helping me lift my mother. "We'll take her to the doctor," he said firmly. "She'll be all right if we act fast." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. My baby cried against my chest, sensing the fear still choking me. For a moment, I thought it was finally over, that maybe justice had come. But later that night, after my mother had been treated and I had returned home, a knock came at my door again. My heart stopped. I opened it slowly, praying it wasn't him. But it wasn't my father this time. It was the sheriff. His face was grave, his voice heavy. "Margaret," he said, "your father has escaped." The sheriff's words froze me where I stood. "Your father has escaped." My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the baby. "Escaped? How?" I whispered, my voice breaking. The sheriff's face was tight with shame. "We had him locked in the holding cell. But somehow, during the night, he overpowered the deputy on duty. He's gone. We're searching, but he could be anywhere." My knees weakened. I clutched the doorframe to keep from collapsing. "You don't understand," I whispered, panic rising in my throat. "If he's free, he'll come here. He'll come for me and the baby." The sheriff laid a hand on my shoulder. "We'll keep watch. Lock your doors. Don't open them for anyone. If you hear anything, send word immediately." I nodded numbly, though inside I felt only dread. The sheriff rode off, leaving me in the darkness of my small house, the baby fussing in my arms, the walls closing in like a trap. That night, I sat by the window with a lantern burning, the knife on the table beside me, every creak of the house making my heart leap. My baby cried off and on, and I rocked him, whispering prayers. But no knock came, no footsteps, just the wind in the trees and the endless pounding of my heart. Days passed. The sheriff and his men searched the woods, the roads, even the old mill. They found no trace of him. It was as though he had vanished into thin air. But I knew better. He was watching. I felt his presence in the silence, in the shadows. I couldn't shake the feeling that his eyes were always on me, even when no one was there. One evening, while feeding the baby, I heard a creak on the porch. My blood ran cold. Knife in hand, I crept to the door, my heart hammering. But when I flung it open, no one was there. Only a small package sat on the step. My breath caught. With trembling hands, I picked it up. Inside was a folded piece of paper. I opened it slowly. Scrawled in my father's handwriting were the words, "I see you. I see the boy. You cannot hide him from me." The paper slipped from my fingers. My stomach twisted, while rising in my throat. He was close. Closer than anyone thought. I ran to my mother's house the next morning, desperate for answers. She was still weak from her wound, but when I showed her the note, her face went white. "Margaret," she whispered, "he'll never stop. As long as he's alive, he'll chase you. He wants control. He wants the child. You have to leave this town before he takes everything from you." Tears blurred my vision. "But where will I go? I have no money, no family except you." She gripped my hand tightly. "There's one person. An old friend of mine, far from here. She can help you. I'll give you her address. But you must leave quickly, tonight, before he finds you again." I nodded, desperation giving me strength. I returned home, packed a small bag with clothes, a blanket, and a little food. I wrapped my baby tight and prepared to flee under the cover of darkness. But as I blew out the lantern and turned to leave, I froze. Because standing inside the house, right by the crib, was my father. His face twisted into a cruel smile as his eyes fixed on the baby. And in a voice that made my blood turn to ice, he said, "You're not going anywhere, Margaret." He stood by the crib, his shadow stretching across the floor, his eyes glowing with madness. My breath hitched, and I instinctively clutched the knife tighter in my hand. "Father," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Please don't. Leave the baby out of this." He tilted his head, his cruel smile widening. "That's my grandchild. My blood. He belongs to me just like you do." I took a step forward, blocking his view of the crib. My heart hammered in my chest. "He's not yours. He's mine. And you will never touch him." His face darkened, his eyes blazing with rage. "You dare defy me, Margaret? After everything I've done for you?" His voice cracked like thunder. "You were born to obey me, to serve me, not to run, not to resist." I swallowed hard, my hands trembling. "I won't live under your chains anymore. I won't let my son grow up in your shadow." For a moment silence hung heavy in the air. Then, like a snake striking, he lunged forward. I screamed and swung the knife wildly. The blade slashed across his arm, and he howled in pain, stumbling back. "You filthy girl!" he roared, grabbing a chair and hurling it across the room. It splintered against the wall, just inches from the crib. The baby wailed, his cries echoing through the small house. I darted forward, scooping my son into my arms, clutching him tightly against my chest. My father staggered toward me, blood dripping from his arm, his face twisted with hate. "You won't escape me," he snarled. "If I can't have you, I'll take the boy." "No," I screamed, clutching the baby tighter. With every ounce of strength in me, I shoved the table between us, blocking his path. But he grabbed the lantern from the shelf, smashing it to the ground. Flames erupted instantly, licking up the walls, the heat spreading like a beast set free. "You'll burn with me," he bellowed, his laughter echoing in the firelight. Smoke filled the air, choking me, burning my eyes. The baby's cries grew sharper, desperate. I coughed, stumbling toward the door, but my father was already there, blocking the only exit, his body a dark silhouette against the flames. The fire roared louder, devouring the wooden beams, the walls closing in. My chest heaved, panic consuming me. I held my baby close, tears streaming down my face. "Please, Father, let us go." But he only grinned through the smoke, his voice low and terrifying. "If you leave, Margaret, I'll hunt you to the ends of the earth. You and that child belong to me." And then, before I could even blink, he reached into his coat and pulled out a revolver. The same one. He raised it, the barrel glinting in the firelight, aimed at my baby. And in that moment, with the fire raging, the smoke choking us, and death just a breath away, the gun went off. The crack of the gun split the night. For a moment I thought my heart had stopped beating. I looked down at my baby in my arms, expecting to see blood. But by some miracle, the bullet had missed him. It had grazed the wall just inches from his tiny head, splintering the wood. I gasped, holding him tighter, sobbing into his blanket. My father cursed, raising the revolver again. His face twisted in fury. But before he could fire a second time, a beam above him gave way. With a deafening crash, it fell, slamming onto his shoulder and pinning him to the ground. He screamed in rage, thrashing against the burning wood. "Margaret," he roared, "don't you dare run. I'll kill you both." The fire raged higher, smoke choking my lungs. I staggered toward the door, but the flames had already spread there. The exit was blocked. I coughed violently, clutching the baby, tears stinging my eyes. I turned to the window. It was small, but it was our only chance. Kicking it open with every ounce of strength left in me, I climbed onto the sill, shielding the baby with my arms. Behind me, my father's voice rose above the fire. "You can't escape me. If you jump, I'll find you. You'll never be free." I ignored him. With a prayer on my lips, I leapt through the window into the night air. We hit the ground hard. Pain shot through my side, but I rolled onto my back, still cradling the baby. He cried but was safe. I scrambled to my feet, stumbling away from the burning house, my body trembling, my ears ringing. Behind me, the flames swallowed the walls, the roof caving in with a thunderous roar. I thought it was over. But then, through the smoke and fire, a shadow emerged. My father. His clothes burned, his skin blistered, but his eyes still wild with hate. And in his scorched hand, he still held the revolver. He staggered forward, coughing blood, his voice hoarse but sharp as ever. You can't run. I froze, my legs weak, my baby screaming in my arms. The fire raged behind him, the gun aimed at me once more. And then, I heard the sound of horses. Lanterns. Shouts. The sheriff and his men burst into the clearing, their guns raised, their faces hard. Drop it, the sheriff roared. It's over. But my father only laughed, a horrible sound mixed with coughs of blood and smoke. His hand tightened on the revolver. And in that split second, with the sheriff's men ready to fire, the flames roaring behind us, and my father's finger pulling the trigger again, another gunshot rang out. But this time, I didn't know whose bullet had found its mark. The night split open with the sound of the gun. For a heartbeat everything froze, the flames, the smoke, even the cries of my baby in my arms. Then slowly my father's body jerked backward. His revolver slipped from his charred hand, clattering to the ground. He staggered, his eyes wide with shock, blood bubbling from his mouth. No! He croaked, his voice ragged. No, she's mine. And then with a final rasp, his body collapsed into the dirt, the firelight flickering across his still face. I stood frozen, trembling violently, the baby clutched against my chest. The sheriff's men rushed forward, stomping out sparks near the ground, but my eyes never left my father's body. It was over. At least that's what I thought. The sheriff stepped closer, his gun still in his hand. You all right, miss? His voice was steady, but his eyes showed pity. We heard screams from the woods. Lucky we came when we did. I nodded slowly, though tears blurred my vision. My throat felt raw, my body heavy. He was my father. The sheriff's face tightened. Men like him don't deserve the name. You and your boy are safe now. But I didn't feel safe. Not yet. I felt empty, like something inside me had shattered beyond repair. As the fire devoured the last of the house, I sank to the ground, rocking the baby in my arms, whispering through tears, it's over, it's over. But was it? Because when the sheriff's men lifted my father's body, I saw something that froze my blood. His eyes, half open, seemed to glare at me still, and the faintest twitch moved in his hand before it fell limp. I gasped, stumbling backward. Careful, I whispered to the baby. What if he isn't gone? The sheriff frowned. What's that? I shook my head quickly. Nothing, nothing. But inside my heart pounded with fear. I had seen it. I knew I had. The men loaded his body onto a wagon, covering it with a tarp. The sheriff turned to me again. We'll take you to town. You'll be safe there. I hesitated, looking back at the smoldering ruins of the house. My father's laughter still echoed in my head. You'll never be free. And as I stepped toward the wagon, my baby whimpering softly in my arms, a terrible thought struck me. What if he was right? What if death itself couldn't stop him? And then, just as I climbed onto the wagon, I thought I heard it. So faint, it could have been the wind. My father's voice, whispering my name. The wagon wheels groaned as they carried me and my baby into town. I sat in the back, rocking him against my chest, trying to convince myself the whispers I'd heard were only in my mind. The sheriff rode beside the wagon, his lantern swinging in the dark. We'll get you a place to rest, he promised. You've been through hell. I nodded, but I didn't answer. My lips were too dry. My thoughts were too loud. I kept seeing my father's eyes, open even in death. I kept hearing his laugh echoing between the trees. When we reached town, the sheriff took me to the boarding house. The owner, a kind woman named Mrs. Porter, gasped when she saw me, covered in soot, hair tangled, trembling with the baby in my arms. Lord have mercy, she whispered, taking me inside. Sit her by the fire. Warm her up. I sat in the parlor, staring into the flames, feeling both drawn and sickened by the fire. My baby whimpered softly, and Mrs. Porter hurried to bring me warm milk and blankets. For the first time in what felt like forever, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could breathe. But that night, when I finally closed my eyes, the nightmare began again. I dreamed of the woods, of the fire, of my father's voice calling me. Only this time he wasn't burning. He stood in the shadows, whole again, his revolver gleaming in his hand. "You thought you were free," he whispered. "But you'll always be mine." I woke with a scream, clutching my baby so tight he cried. My chest heaved, sweat drenching my body. "Mrs. Porter rushed in with a lamp, her eyes wide with concern. "Child, it's just a dream," she said softly. "You're safe here." But deep down I wasn't sure. The next morning, I went into town square to see the sheriff. I needed proof. I needed to know for certain my father was gone. "Where's his body?" I asked, my voice trembling. The sheriff frowned. "Buried out by the edge of town. Don't you worry yourself about him no more." But I couldn't stop worrying. I needed to see. That night, against all sense, I walked out to the burial ground. The moon hung low, the wind cold against my face. My baby was asleep in Mrs. Porter's care, so I carried only a lantern in my shaking hand. I found the fresh grave, the dirt piled high, the wooden cross standing above it. My father's name scratched into the wood. For a moment, I almost felt relief. But then I saw it. The dirt had shifted, like something had moved underneath. My lantern shook in my hand as my breath caught. I stepped back, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break. The chuckle was faint, like it rose from the roots of the earth itself, but I heard it. My knees nearly gave out beneath me. "No," I whispered, gripping the lantern so tight the glass rattled. "You're gone. You're dead. I saw you fall." But the dirt before me shifted again. Just the smallest tremor, like a hand pressing from below. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the lantern. The flame inside flickered wildly, throwing twisted shadows across the grave. My breath came in ragged bursts as the air turned cold and heavy, almost impossible to breathe. Then, suddenly, it was silent again. I stood frozen, staring at the mound of earth. Waiting. Nothing moved. Nothing spoke. Finally, with trembling legs, I forced myself to turn away. My lantern bobbed as I hurried back toward town, whispering prayers under my breath. "It's in my head. It's in my head. He's gone. He's gone." But when I reached the boarding house, Mrs. Porter was waiting at the door with the baby in her arms. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tight. "You shouldn't have gone out there," she said, her voice low and sharp. "The sheriff warned me you might." I froze, staring at her. "How did you know where I went?" She didn't answer. She only looked down at the baby in her arms, then back up at me with eyes that held something I couldn't read. "Evil doesn't stay buried," she whispered. "Best not to dig at it." Her words chilled me to the bone. That night, as I rocked my son to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew something. Something about my father. Something she wasn't telling me. And then, just as I laid the baby in the cradle, I saw it. Scratched into the wood of the window frame. 3 words. "I am back." The lantern slipped from my hand, crashing to the floor as I let out a scream. Mrs. Porter rushed in, her face pale as she saw the words too. But when she looked at me, her eyes didn't show surprise. They showed recognition. The words carved into the window frame burned into my mind. "I am back." I stumbled backward, clutching my baby tight to my chest. Mrs. Porter stood in the doorway, her lamp casting long shadows across the room. You knew," I whispered. My voice cracked with fear. "You knew he wasn't gone." Mrs. Porter's lips trembled. She set the lamp on the table and folded her hands together, her eyes glistening. "Child, your father was a wicked man. Wicked in ways most can't even imagine. When men like him die, their spirits don't rest easy. They claw, they linger, they find ways to torment what they can't let go of." My chest tightened, and I shook my head fiercely. "No, he's dead. I saw him die." She stepped closer, her voice low and steady. "Yes, his body died. But evil don't die the same way." Just then, a violent gust of wind slammed against the window. The lantern flickered, shadows stretched, and I heard it again. My father's laugh. Low. Mocking. Everywhere at once. I screamed, dropping to my knees, clutching the baby as he cried. You'll never be free, the voice hissed. Never. Mrs. Porter grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to look at her. You can be free, she said sharply. But not if you keep letting his shadow rule you. His power ends where your courage begins. Do you understand me? Her words rang through me like a strike of lightning. My hands trembled, but I pulled myself up, rocking my son in my arms. No, I whispered, then louder, no. You don't own me anymore. The wind howled louder, rattling the walls. The baby wailed. My heart thundered. But I stood firm. You hurt me. You scarred me. You tried to break me. But you won't have him. I cried, holding my baby up toward the light. This child is mine. His life will not be cursed by you. For a moment, the whole room shuddered. The carved words on the window seemed to glow faintly, then began to fade, burning away as though erased by unseen fire. And then, silence. The wind stopped. The shadows sank back into their corners. The laugh was gone. Mrs. Porter let out a shaky breath, tears streaking down her face. It's over, she whispered. I clutched my baby close, my body shaking with relief and exhaustion. But inside I knew she was right. Evil doesn't die easy. But courage can bury it deeper than any grave. From that night forward, I carried my scars, but I also carried my strength. My father had tried to chain me with fear, but in breaking free, I found something he could never touch. Hope. And that hope, I vowed, would be my son's inheritance. Not pain. Not fear. Only hope. Years had passed since that terrible night, but the memories never fully left me. The fire, the gunshots, the terror of my father's presence, they were carved into my soul. But now, sitting on the porch of my small home in the countryside, I could finally breathe. My son David laughed as he chased butterflies across the yard. His bright eyes sparkled in the sunlight, untainted by fear or cruelty. I smiled, my heart swelling with a mix of pride and relief. Come here, David. I called and he ran to me, arms open. I lifted him onto my lap, feeling the warmth of his small body. You are free, my darling. Free from shadows, free from fear. Always remember that. He grinned, his laughter ringing through the air like music. I know, Mom. You're the bravest person I know. I kissed his forehead, tears glistening in my eyes. Life hadn't been easy. The scars remained, not just mine but his too, but we were alive. We had survived. And more than that, we had hope. I looked around at the peaceful countryside, the sunlight painting everything golden. For the first time in decades, I truly felt safe. And I realized, the past may shape you, but it doesn't have to define you. Courage, love, and perseverance can outshine even the darkest of shadows. From the ashes of fear, we had built our own life, one full of laughter, love, and light. And that, my friends, is the greatest victory of all. Sparkling Heart, thank you for following my story. I'm Sarah, speaking from North Carolina. If you've been with me through every chapter, please like, subscribe, and click the notification button for more life-changing stories. And I'd love to hear from you. Where in the country are you watching from? Share your stories too, because courage is meant to inspire. Remember, no matter how dark the night, the dawn will come.